Dheeraj, it's a pleasure to welcome you. Um, Last time we spoke, Nutanix was the darling, and you created a fabulous company, gave so much value back to the ecosystem, become a role model. You're on to your next venture. But before I talk about the next venture, I wanted to get some basics. People want to know from a successful and a serial entrepreneur like you, what does it take to exit at such high valuation and then come back and think of another startup? Normally you want to go and enjoy your time and spend things with spend time with other people, etc. But there are very few people who have this bug, and they keep coming back to create value. So if there is something that is the essence of this, I'd like to know from you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you as well. A lot of the real difficulty in starting again, I call it reset to zero. The real difficulty is to rewind time. Like, how do you rewind time and really go back to as if nothing had happened in the last 10, 12 years, So a lot of people actually told me, really, are you going to do this? Like, isn't it going to be hard? And wasn't it hard the first time? But there was a joy of working. There was a joy when you saw the customer and they gave you feedback and they started to like it, they started to love it, how they were willing to take the war with you, because they were the underserved customer and you were really trying to be their best friend. The market starts to really be with you, and that joy is just inexplicable, Also creating something out of nothing when most of the world is saying it's impossible or it's hard to do. It just gives a different kind of endorphin, dopamine, oxytocin, all these, enzymes, the biochemicals start to come out as well. So it's just an exhilarating experience, and most importantly, I think the purpose in life that can actually help you live longer as well. Many people, they actually stop to have a purpose. In fact, people say if you stop walking, you'll live shorter. If you continue to walk, you can live longer. So the goal is to learn. The goal is to continue to walk and to defy the critics who feel like it's impossible to go take some of these big wigs head on, and that gives, a different kind of a dopamine that is just hard to actually get. And then when you do all this stuff, you also set an example for your children, to know what it means to work hard and define the word purpose.
These attributes, some are very inherent. You're born with it, but you discover as you move along in life, depending on the circumstances. Unfortunately, for most of the people who are in the developing world, they kind of just die down because they don't get the opportunity. We are the privileged ones who got this opportunity, went to good schools, came here. Silicon Valley is awesome. There's no other place like that in the whole world. How much do you think is inherent? How much do you think is acquired? For people to understand, because it's not about money. Initially it is about money, because chasing a dream because you want the money. But after that, I have interviewed hundreds of them, and every single one told me it's not about money. It's about exactly what you said. Chasing your dream of creating a value, satisfying customers, creating a new market for some, and obviously being a role model, not only for kids, but for all the young people around the world. So I'm just trying to learn, how much is inherent and how much is acquired.
Some elements of risk-taking is like this, ho jayega, it'll happen. Just take one step at a time. If anything, it's been mentioned in Gita about just karma versus the result. And I think it's equally true for entrepreneurship as well. You can overthink 3 years out, but if you do the right things for this one customer, this one deal, this one employee, this one feature, this one product, I think good things continue to happen, But risk-taking, there's an inherent element of cognitive bias there. My philosophy in entrepreneurship is it's not as irrational as people think it to be. The rationality of entrepreneurship, i.e. letting go of the bird in hand for the two in the bush, is very paradoxical. On one hand, you think you're letting go of the bird in hand and going for the two in the bush. You're quitting your job, you're leaving your current thing to go and redefine something that could be 10x larger. it looks very irrational, but the rationality behind it is that you're always thinking about the worst case. And to me, it's like you look at the worst case, and the worst is not bad enough. You pull the trigger on this new idea that you have, and that's the way most entrepreneurs actually think. They're always thinking about the worst case as well. They're one of the most paranoid people that you know of, and also the most optimistic people that you know of. They're very schizophrenic. They are walking a tightrope. They balance the opposites. They're extremely cognitively dissonant. There's a paragraph or two in the book *Sapiens* where Yuval Harari talks about cognitive dissonance. And he said a lot of people think that it's not natural to have cognitive dissonance, but the way he talks about cognitive dissonance in cultures and in societies, and how they are the highs and lows of music, you basically it drives culture to be cognitively dissonant. And I think entrepreneurship is exactly that. You're optimistic, you're paranoid, you're long-term, you're short-term. You're thinking about acting, being a global company and still acting local. There's tons of these opposites that you got to balance in your head. It's the left brain and the right brain. I think I learned a lot about the right brain in the last 15, 20 years. I was always, I would say, curious about history and English and things of that nature. But last 15 years growing up with Apple, I learned about what it means to make things effortless. They made a lot of things effortless in our lives. If anything, the whole paradigm of DevRev is about making things effortless. Customer support, product management, software engineering, customer success. A lot of these things are just extremely effortful right now because there's so many tools, so many departments, so many emails, Slack channels, all those things. So I think effortless can be learned because you're every day trying to put yourself in the shoes of the underserved user. And many a time they're not in the room when you're making a decision. It's like it's the empty chair that you need to actually think of. It's for them. Empathy does take a lot of practice. And I think there are other things that you bring to the table which could be, learned along the way, like, software engineering and, customer support and things of that nature can be learned. But there are many things that actually need to be inculcated and takes 10, 20, 30 years, like empathy is one of them,
Thank you. Very, very good points. You just mentioned DevRev. Wanted to expand on that. When you are a leader, if the kind of company you build, the second one, again, kind of starting from the scratch. But I think you would have access to the capital, you would have access to connectivity, resources. But I think the most important element, second time, third time onwards, is finding the right team. A team is what builds good companies. So you have some reputation, you have some connections, but not all of them will come back to you, because everybody will not be as gung-ho for DevRev as they were for Nutanix. So then how do you go about making sure that the team is there for me to go on the second journey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great point. Somebody brought this up a couple of days ago as well. You need it to be as diverse as it was the first time. You need it to be as hungry as it was the first time. Because if you're bringing hunger, they also need to bring as much hunger. And many of the people who were there in the last one probably didn't even come in the early stages. They came later. There's a bell curve of adoption, not just tech adoption, but even company adoption and employer adoption. It starts with innovators, early adopters, then it comes to early majority, then late majority, and then there are laggards. And they all have a different risk profile. So, this time around when you're resetting it, you have to look for those innovators and early adopters who will bring extreme amounts of hunger, humility, even a level of happiness about walking in the fog. Because when you're trying to create something out of nothing, there's so much of uncertainty that you can still sleep well is a very important attribute of early employees just as much, because you don't want to keep managing their emotions when you have to really go wage a war against competitors and in this underserved market. So this idea of hunger needs to be recreated. I mean, this new company I'm like, okay, let's do without an EA for as long as I could, because in the last one I had like 2-3 people helping me around. I had a office of the CEO. There was a whole bunch of analysts and people around, chief of staff, everything else. But this time I said, let's shrink down to nothing, just me and Calendly and LinkedIn. What can I do? How long can I do this? That's the kind of hunger that you need to bring to the table, where you're not sitting in your ivory tower, corner office, mahogany tables, lots of help around you. I think that is what we need from all our employees in the early stages. In fact, forever, not just early stages. This idea of entitlement that I have arrived is what comes in the way, because you got to go and be shameless again. There's a good book called The Innovation Stack, and Jack Dorsey is creating Square for the second time after having done Twitter, and nobody actually gave him any ear at all. It's like, what are you talking about, this card swiping thing, and taking the credit card industry head on? He didn't have any takers in the early stages. Nobody would give him a meeting. I take another example of Intel in 86, 85, 86. They're almost written off, and nobody would take a meeting with Andy Grove. And by 1990, when Microsoft and Intel came together, it took them 4, 5, 6 years until Windows 95 to really say that we have re-arrived in some sense. Amazon bit in 2001 and 2007. Lehman Brothers used to think that they'll go bankrupt. So you have to walk on fire. You have to have the world basically tell you don't deserve to exist. And that's the thing that tests you. If you're not worthy of that test, then maybe you don't deserve, and maybe you don't have the conviction. The world is only trying to test your conviction. Like, are you sure? And they'll say it in different ways by saying, I don't think this is possible. I think you'll die. I don't think the world needs this. The market doesn't have appetite for this or that. Need to go through all that to come out on the other side and say, look, I had to keep all self-doubt away and not listen to the market, not naysayers, but listen to the innovators and the early adopters, because those are the people that build companies.
Fabulous, great wisdom. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming and taking your time.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to staying in touch.